I really do like my high octane action in stories. I mean, look at what's happening in Jujutsu Kaisen at the moment. It's freaking crazy. Still, there are times when I just want to see a more relaxing side of things, and that's what I've been doing for a little while, just reading wholesome manga. And to share what I've been reading, I want to first take a look at a manga called Barakamon. There's this 23-year-old calligrapher named Honda. He gets sent to an island after he hits a judge at an exhibition for calligraphy. You see, Honda is actually famous for his calligraphy, but most of that is because his father is a very legendary calligrapher. Maybe it's because he has some deep-rooted insecurity about this, or it's just because he's young. But either way, he is a pretty angsty person. He's mean, very unfriendly, and has this kind of dark side to him. Early on, that's the type of atmosphere that follows Honda around, very doom and gloom. When we compare that to this beautiful island, there's a very big contrast. When Honda first arrives on the island, he is immediately shown a strong sense of community. An old man gives him a ride from the airport to his house. The neighbors help him move, and something that's pretty random is that the house he moves into is a hideout of all the kids in the village. Honestly, the best moments in Barakamon is Honda constantly having some stupid and funny encounters with the villagers. It's what brings him closer to this tight-knit community that at first seemed so distant to Honda. He experiences a local tradition where the whole island goes to the cemetery and lights fireworks. He gets to know a nice old lady who owns the local shop. He goes fishing and is constantly developing friendships with all the locals. And oh yeah, he's constantly getting swarmed with all the kids and teenagers in his little village, because they either like to mess with him or really just play around with him. Usually it's just them messing with him though. One of these kids is called Naru, who is constantly around him. She's a little ball of energy that is very curious and runs all over the place. You can't talk about Barakamon without talking about Naru, because she's pretty much the star in this manga. When you boil things down, she's just a little kid who has a very strong relationship with Honda, but trust me, there's a lot more to it if you read the story. Honda starts to become a guardian to her in a way, but also not exactly. And Naru is someone who ends up changing Honda for the better, and by the end of things, it's very wholesome. What makes Barakamon so special is how Honda ends up fitting into this island. He goes from being a complete stranger to knowing about all the residents of the village, and he becomes a part of it. One of my favorite things that Honda says in the story is that a few words can change a person. Whenever he's passing by a villager, they would usually greet him. I mean, at first, he wouldn't say anything back. But then this started to grow into him starting to talk back to them, starting to greet them first, and slowly things would go from being short little greetings into longer conversations, and before he knew it, he ended up becoming a completely different person. Besides seeing a nice heartwarming slice of life manga surrounding an island, getting to see this unsociable and prickly guy become a person who looks out for other people, and seeing him grow to be a kinder person, that's what makes me want to recommend this one to other people. And also the whole thing with Naru and all the little kids bugging him all the time, it's pretty funny. It seems the people who surround us have such a great impact on who we are, so much so that in a way, they make us who we are. That's very evident in Barakamon because Honda is surrounded by a whole bunch of joyful kids who like to play with him, and very helpful villagers, and he turns into one of those villagers himself. I enjoyed myself a lot with this one. It's been such a long time since I felt a bittersweet emotion after finishing the story. Still, it's because of all this, I can't help but recommend it to everyone who hasn't heard about it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if most of you have already seen it, especially the anime, which is spectacular with what it's able to do in 12 episodes. And there's also a prequel, which is actually how I first came across Barakamon, called Honda-Kun, which just shows Honda in school. Hirayasumi is the best one on this list because Fortnite is featured in it. We all love Fortnite. I don't know. Anyways, Hirayasumi has some very cozy artwork. It gives off the vibes of what a typical day is like and what a typical night is like. You know, just everyday life, which in my opinion is hard to convey through art alone. Now, just like in everyday life, I think this feels so realistic in terms of the feelings of the characters and in how they have a lot of ups and downs throughout their days. The main character is this guy called Hiroto. He's 29, at least at the start of the story, and he had a friendship with this old lady whose name is Wada Hane. That doesn't really matter too much because she dies pretty early on, I think in the first chapter, at 83. And although this just touched on a bit more in the story, she leaves her house to Haruto. Originally, Haruto, when he was younger, went to Tokyo to pursue an acting career, but he didn't make it, so he became a carefree guy working at a fishing pond. This has Natsumi, who is 18, comes to stay with him after he gets this house to study at university in Tokyo. She is a bit of a handful, but this manga shows Natsumi getting used to this new life in Tokyo, going to school, making friends, and learning new things. Not only do we see the struggles of Natsumi, but also the struggles of Haruto, living this new life, owning this new house. How Haruto actually supports Natsumi, and vice versa. There are times when things start going a bit deeper into the characters and their emotions, which is a side of things that I really like. It does this with most of the people in the story, but I really like how it does it with Haruto. I think a few people in the story tell him he's almost 30, he needs to get his act together, be more responsible, and he needs to start thinking about the future. Even the granny says something about this in the beginning. It's a big thing to tackle. And this is kind of what I'm talking about when I'm saying the character's problems feel pretty realistic. For some reason though, Hirayasumi feels very plain in every aspect, but it's that exact plainness that makes it feel special to me. It doesn't feel as wholesome as the other mangas on this list, but it is interesting if you like slice of life. Part-time Otherworlder. In this one, there's this guy named Tanaka. He's a Freeter who does some odd jobs, but starts to get transported to another world and stays in this world for only like minutes, few seconds even, and gets transported back pretty quickly. Usually he appears when there are some people in trouble, and after he helps, he gets sent right back to Earth. It's a pretty funny gimmick, and in the first chapter, Tanaka has an injured hand and can't work because of it. While on the train home, he drifts off and finds himself watching a big beast cat bothering some children. He plays with it a bit, and he's seen as a beast tamer, and so he gets teleported back with a potion. There's this other chapter where Tanaka enters a hot spring but only finds ogres, and he thinks they're just really buff old people for some reason, which is a pretty interesting thought process. But what he doesn't know is that the ogres have been trying to build a friendly relationship with humans for a long time without any luck, and so they opened up some hot springs to bathe with humans, but no one's been brave enough to go in this hot spring with them. But once the ogres see Tanaka just chilling out, they're pretty happy. And there's a group of humans that were watching this, and so they get out from where they were hiding and go take a bath with them. Just like that, there's peace between ogres and humans, thanks to Tanaka. And then because he stayed in too long, Tanaka just kind of passes out in the water and then gets transported back to his own world. Poor Tanaka. I think one of my favorite chapters is this one where Tanaka is at a job where he has to dress up as a bear and hand out balloons to kids. He also has this co-worker who has to dress up like a rabbit and, also has to hand out balloons to kids. And so Tanaka gets transported to this random tunnel, very sketchy maze type thing in the other world. And there's a kid running away saying that there's a very scary rabbit monster trying to kill him. Tanaka just thinks this is his co-worker, so he doesn't think much of it. But eventually this scary rabbit monster does appear, and still Tanaka thinks it's actually his co-worker, but he runs away because he wants the kid to have peace of mind. Eventually though, Tanaka finds the kid's parents in this maze, and meanwhile he also loses the rabbit, so they don't have to worry about that. But the whole time Tanaka just thinks it's his co-worker who was chasing kids around and looked pretty scary. After he finds the kid's parents, he gets transported back, and again, he saves the day. There's only 19 chapters in this manga, so it'd probably take you less than half an hour if you decide to just blitz through it. Maybe even more. I don't know. I'm a slow reader, so it usually takes me a while. It's a blend of slice of life and isekai that isn't very generic. It's short and sweet, so there's not really a lot to lose if you decide to read it. Honestly, probably one of my favorite isekai stories. Yotsuba. And this next one has one of the most goofy and energetic little characters you will ever see anywhere, and her name is Yotsuba. Yotsuba is a little girl who is exploring the big, wide world. She's very curious about everything around her. The prominent people here are her neighbors, who she likes to play with, her dad, and two of her dad's friends. The story revolves around her neighborhood, which sounds honestly kind of boring, but a big part of why this one is very fun and a great read is because we see the world through the eyes eyes of a kid. There's a very innocent view to everything, and everything is full of adventure. Every turn is a new discovery. Now, Yotsuba, being a kid, is very gullible, and as wholesome as this manga is, it's also very comedic. Yotsuba's dad and the older characters like to mess with Yotsuba because she takes a lot of things at face value without knowing any better. One of my favorite little storylines is when Yotsuba finds her neighbor Enna messing around with a robot in her house. And really, the robot is Enna's friend, and they are doing a project for school, recycling cardboard. But Enna, not wanting to disappoint Yotsuba, tells her that it's an actual robot. So Yotsuba goes on thinking for actually a long time throughout the story that this robot is a real robot that's just kept in Enna's house, or kept in her neighbor's house. There's a bunch of these kind of funny moments throughout Yotsuba, so it's definitely worth checking out for yourself. And I think one of the greatest things about this story is that it gives this feeling that reminds me of a time when I was a kid, and every day was just filled with fun and seemed so magical. Yotsuba, out of all the stories in this video, is definitely the embodiment of wholesomeness, if nothing else. The World of Machida-Kun is one that I found out of nowhere. It has this very special character, Machida, who almost seems perfect. He's always being kind, helping out wherever he can. He has a big family, as he is the oldest child of 6, and he's always doing his best to take care of them as an older brother. Just by being kind to people, Machida has a massive effect on everybody around him. He makes the world a bit brighter. If there's something that Machida does to a lot of the characters in here, it's that he changes their perspective on some things in life. Now, it is interesting because Machida most of the time is caught up in his own thoughts, and at the beginning, he's looking down on himself because he doesn't think he does anything. He doesn't think he has any good points about himself, which everyone around him would obviously say he does have a lot of good points. He's always looking out for others, finding any way he can help and support the people around him. I don't have too much to say about it besides the fact it's a short one. If you like slice of life and diabetes, then this one's definitely for you. There's only 27 chapters, so again, not a super long read. Farming, cows, grass, fences, livestock. Silver Spoon, right next to Barakamon, is one of those stories that is definitely special. It starts off with a kid from middle school going to some agricultural high school. Hachiken is the kid's name. He's very smart, but due to a bad relationship with his parents, he ran away to this school. When Hachiken gets to this high school, unlike when he was in middle school, he actually connects with the people around him. A lot of that seems to be because the emphasis on grades and class ranking isn't as important as it is in normal schools. And I mean, the main thing that's super important is actually taking care of the livestock, because this school is pretty much a farm and they use the kids as slaves. The students wake up at 5 a.m. to take care of chickens, do ranch or farm work. Again, they're just slaves. But it's connecting with the people around him that makes Hachiken's perspective change throughout his life at this school. He goes into it not really knowing what he wants to do with his life, and obviously holding some big grudges against his at least his dad, and really just both his parents. It's actually his relationship with his parents that gets a lot of attention, because they show just how much Hachiken grows and changes as he goes throughout his school life. It's not the most frequent thing that we get to see, but the relationship holds a lot of weight in the story and gets pretty emotional. He starts to see that not having a specific dream doesn't make his future hopeless. Instead, it gives him limitless options for the future. Hachiken learns a lot of lessons at this agricultural school, and there's one point when he and his parents are talking, and he actually compares the lives of the livestock to his own, because his dad is a bit harsh on him, to say the least. His dad thinks that if he fails at all, then it's over. He has no future for some reason. I don't know why. His dad's a weird one. But what Hachiken says is that the livestock, they only have one purpose, and if they fail, they are killed. Humans, however, can make all the mistakes they want, and they can keep trying, which I thought was a very powerful thing to, just say. There's also one thing that the principal says that I really like. It's something along the lines that, again, the livestock and animals, they are boxed into one place, but the students, they can run free and escape anywhere if they're trying trying to survive. And that's one thing I like about Silver Spoon. It's actually able to convey these two messages very well, and it honestly reinforces these themes a lot, and I really just like that. It's why it's so great to me. My favorite section in Silver Spoon is actually one of the final arcs. There's this guy named Ukawa who is graduating and hasn't found anything to do after high school. So Hachiken jokingly tells him to start his own company and become a president. This makes Hachiken actually think about taking his own advice, and he does start a company, and that's what the final arc is really about, him trying to start up this company to help small struggling farms. And the story, which was already really interesting to me, just learning about what goes on at Iezo Agricultural High School, seeing all the livestock, seeing the horses, the horse races, everything. I will say we only get to see a small portion of that before the story ends, but it does get pretty crazy, especially with the direction things take. I just really like the idea that not having your future mapped out for yourself isn't something that makes you a failure. Even when things don't go your way, you still haven't failed. One of the characters, called Komaba, is a very skilled baseball player who helps his mom run their struggling farm. Some things really go downhill for him, but he never lets that stop him from continuing on and building something for himself. Honestly, pretty inspiring. The story tackles a very interesting look at a coming of age story and the worries that many teenagers, and really just anybody, have for their future. To me, it's really no surprise that this is such a well-written story when the one behind it is actually the same author of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Hiromu Arakawa. She is just awesome. What can I say? This one is probably the best one. The Greatest Estate Developer. It's a wholesome adventure, if that makes any sense. This is 100%, without a shadow of a doubt, my favorite manhwa, easily. Lloyd Frontera is a guy who's at the bottom of the bottom, a drunk who likes to drink until he drops, and when he's not doing that, he's causing trouble for everybody around him. His parents, the random people on the street, the people that just live in his neighborhood. He's the son of a baron, so you would think he could at least show some nobility, but he has none of that whatsoever. And so when the main character, Kim Suho, gets teleported and isekai'd into this guy's body, he comes to inhabit this guy's body, he has a very bad start in this new world. It's less than being at rock bottom, and that's one of the things that makes this manhwa so fun. No one trusts Lloyd at all in the beginning. The point where now that our main character is trying to change his image, nothing really works. Kim Suho's first thing he does is that his family is in debt, and they're on the verge of going bankrupt. So he ignores the fact that everybody, literally everybody around him hates him, and decides to kick his adventure off by getting rid of his family's debt. He gets rid of a corrupt noble, gets some loan sharks off of his dad's back. He works out a ton with his servant, who's actually a swordmaster. His servant's name is Xavier, and he becomes a very cool guy in the story. Also, right from the jump, as it said in the title, he starts building and crafting. That was corny. It doesn't sound so exciting, but that's one of the first ways he shows that he is sincere about being a better person. He's the son of a baron, and he has a duty towards his people, towards the people. So after he gets isekai'd into Lloyd's life, he finds himself waking up in the streets, discovering that the night before, the real Lloyd completely wrecked and trashed a bar, destroying the livelihood of the bar owner, and putting the bar owner's mother in a pretty bad position. Hearing this, Lloyd goes and apologizes, which surprises the bar owner so much that he doesn't even trust him at all, and just wants him gone from his bar. And it's not like the apology will do much anyways. But Lloyd, being a completely new person, literally builds a house for the bar owner and his mother. Now, this is where we see one of my favorite aspects about Lloyd. We learned in his previous life, his father gave everything so that Lloyd could go to school and have a better future. With this, Lloyd worked very hard. Very, very hard. He had a part-time job while still going to school and made sure he was always at the top of his classes, always caught up with his studies, and even then, things just didn't work out. He was aiming to become a civil engineer, and just as he sees the light at the end of the tunnel, it always got farther away. You can tell that this guy worked very hard in his previous life, and he will do anything to make sure that this new one doesn't go the same way as his last one went. I really like when isekai stories do this, where they just actually take the backstory of the person who got isekai'd into account and just don't use it as one little gimmick, and instead incorporate it into a bigger part of the character. I mean, that's why I really like a story like Mushoku Tensei, where the guy was a shut-in, and that gets played upon a whole lot within the story. The same thing happens here. I mean, Lloyd, used to work part-time, used to do construction, was aiming to become a civil engineer, and you really see that reflect in his character. He never, ever lets people work harder than him, and he's always there to ensure everybody's safety, even at the cost of himself. I mean, within the first, I think it's actually the 10th chapter, they're digging a hole to get some coal, and he pretty much sacrifices himself to get everybody to safety while he fights some huge freaking ants. And you see, being a hard worker, it's something I like about Lloyd's character a lot, but that isn't all. He's also a bum.
Man, shut your bitch ass.
Or at least he has to act like it sometimes, or else otherwise people would get way too suspicious of him for changing so suddenly. And what I mean when I say he's a bum, he's not really a bum. Instead, he just has to have this demeanor that a villain would have, and he has to act very mean all the time to whatever situation he walks into. Surprisingly, it gets a lot of things done a lot faster. But although he'll act like a villain, for the people that are close to him, the people he cares about, which is everybody in his estate, obviously his parents and stuff, he may act like a complete ass, but he has a heart of gold. He's always willing to sacrifice himself if need be whenever a person in his estate is in trouble. Anybody in his estate, and even strangers that live in other countries. But one thing, when he does come across the villains of the story, he really does act like a villain himself. I mean, some of the expression he makes, you'd think he's a demon. It's actually very entertaining to see someone more evil than the actual villains themselves, who also, is very nice to the people around him. But man, you do not want to get on this man's bad side, because he's always playing 1,000 IQ, 40 chess. He's a very smart guy. He is such an unconventional main character when it comes to an isekai story. He acts like a villain on the outside, but again, has a very kind heart. Really though, it adds so much charm to him. Lloyd truly is such an interesting character, but seeing him alongside his servant Xavier, going out of their estate, exploring different towns and cities, is another great part of this story. You get to explore the world. They go to the royal capital and fight off evil mages. They go to another freaking country to kind of swindle the guy, the king over there, the Sultan, all the while developing their own estate using Lloyd's background in civil engineering and fighting off any threats using the combined efforts of Lloyd, his very OP skills, and Xavier's swordsmanship skills. Lloyd literally manipulates one of the strongest characters, who is also the queen of the kingdom he's in. He defends a coastal town from a huge sea monster, almost dies in the process, and he defeats a literal knight from hell with his awful, terrible singing. Although he's always saying he's only looking out for himself all the time, and he wants nothing but to relax in his countryside with a whole bunch of money, that's just what things look like on the surface. After reading so many stupid isekai stories, my expectations were so low going into this, but I was very surprised that there are still some isekai stories that give you a sense of adventure. There's so much character and personality to this that it's definitely worth checking out for yourself. I do have one small grievance, which this isn't really me hating on things. It's just there are times when things are way too convenient for Lloyd. One example is whenever he runs into any trouble at all, he has a living and breathing cheat code right next to him, aka his servant Xavier. But also there's the fact that he can just summon a pet that fits his needs perfectly. Again, it's just me being nitpicky, and honestly there's even bigger problems down the line that his OP powers don't really work that well against. Despite this, things just flow so well, unlike a lot of manga I've read. The pacing is actually an aspect that I didn't even think about until after I was about 50 chapters into it. Things are so cohesive, and it never gets boring because you're constantly going from one thing to the next. Each arc is as entertaining as the last, if not more. To top it all off, the artwork is always amazing. And if all that doesn't convince you, there's even a gacha system in here, which for those of you not in the know, gacha pretty much equals gambling. So yeah, there's gambling. My favorite. Not really. Please handle your finances responsibly, please. Please. Also, I have a bonus, kinda. There's this one manga I've been wanting to talk about ever since I read it, which was probably like 2 years ago now. Usagi Drop. I probably would have included this on this list. At least that's what I would have said if the ending didn't make it the most terrible, disgusting piece of dog poop I've ever read. Honestly, I would have been a lot happier if the stupid and gross stuff that happens near the end of the story just happened right off the bat, so I could write it off as completely bad. I mean, the ending just screws up everything. And just to spoil things, because you should not read this, the author makes you think that there's a wholesome relationship between a dad and his adopted daughter, and towards the end becomes something Drake would like. The dad, eventually at the end, ends up dating his own adopted daughter. What's worse is that when I was reading this, I just got done reading Yotsuba and Barakamon, so I thought it was going to be like that, but it's bad. It broke me. I just need to vent about that somewhere, anywhere, so thank you. So traumatic. Anyways, I've been all over this place in this video, and I definitely put a lot more focus on certain manga, and I mean especially manhwas. But it was fun for me to explore each one of them, and I hope it was fun for you too. Anyways, peace.
I can't tell you how to see me.